I'm stronger than I've ever been before. When you're feeling weak, we're stronger. We are strong. We're stronger. Stronger than we've ever been.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Stronger with Armstrong podcast series. I'm your host, Eddie Armstrong, and today, as always, it just never seems to escape me how amazing these opportunities are for me, and some of them seem to be pretty seamless. When I call on individuals across our great state to tell them that I'm interested in interviewing them about their stories exactly where they are. My guest today, I caught on a Sunday afternoon, chilling out, and I mentioned to him that I'd recently watched an amazing documentary about one of his cohorts in the civil rights movement out of Atlanta, Georgia, the Ambassador Andrew Young. And in our conversation, it spawned some thoughts of my guest's time in office and through his illustrious career. And without fail, when I called you, you said yes. Now, I don't know if that's because maybe along the lines, the Armstrongs and the Mazes ate a lot of dinners together, and I'm told that there may be some distant kinship here, but we'll dig into that today. But Justice, Supreme Court Justice, former legislator, practicing attorney, 7 scores, father, grandfather, all the titles. I know you simply as Mr. Mays, my mentor, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us with Stronger with Armstrong.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Armstrong.
We're honored to have you. My guests will hopefully be moved. I'm certain I am always moved to walk in your office and see the photographs from Africa to Arkansas and from the White House to the state capitol. You have been and seen quite a bit in your journey, and you're still continuing to proceed. So today, like every episode, we're going to unpack some questions for our Stronger with Armstrong viewers and just learn a little bit about who Richard Mays Sr. is. First things first, in his technology world, as you know, he might have cases and spaces and people tagging him. But can you take us back to the beginning, watching your fathers and elders create affordable housing in Central Arkansas? I know Village Square and Shorter Garden on the north side, North Little Rock, shout out Shorter Garden. But what drove that work and how did it shape your view of community building in Little Rock, Arkansas during those times?
Well, I was very fortunate to have a father who was an entrepreneur, who was committed to developing Arkansas and committed to making sure that his family had a decent standard of living. And my father owned a restaurant. He was in the restaurant business first, and then he got into the liquor store business. Then he went into real estate, which was a expanding business, and I learned so much from him. I remember once when I would work for him, even when in the summers at the restaurant. And when I was in college and during the summer, I would come back and work. And I remember one evening late, I was working with him and I had something I wanted to do a little before we normally close. So I asked my daddy, I said, look, Daddy, I got something I want to do. Can I get off a little early tonight? He said, yeah, get off. So about 12 o'clock, two couples came in, and they sat down, and I waited on them, and I didn't think anything about it. But after I got through waiting on him, he asked me, he said, son, who sent you to college? And I was going to Howard at the time. And I said, no, you sent me to college, Daddy. He said, no. He said, those people that you just treated disrespectfully over there sent you to college. And if you don't go over there and apologize, they're not gonna continue to pay your tuition. So I had not realized that I had been disrespectful, but I was happy that he let me understand that. So I went over and I apologized and I told him that I was sorry. I was trying to get to another date, but there was nothing that was more important than treating them respectfully. So they thanked me for apologizing, and I appreciate my father for letting me understand that the challenge of life is every day, and how you treat people can make a big difference in your future and how people respond to you. And I was I learned a lot from that experience, and he was a very important part of the foundation of trying to survive in Arkansas at that time. Even though it was much better at that point in time, I don't remember. That was past 57 where the real challenge for school integration occurred, and Eisenhower had to send down the troops. But Little Rock had a history of separate, and blacks lived in a certain place. The bathrooms were black and colored and white, I should say, even in the courthouse. And the schools were obviously segregated, and the neighborhoods were too. So that was a different period, and the opportunities to work were limited. I can remember that Mr. Hunter, one of the first police officers, and first black police officers in Little Rock, how long he continued to be the sole police in the black community. I mean, at that time. So things started changing later, but it was a big difference when we were growing up and the kind of environment that my kids grew up in.
Sure.
Because schools were integrated and they had the opportunity. Now, my brother graduated from the University of Arkansas. He was one of the first blacks to go up to the University of Arkansas, but he had a scholarship, football scholarship, to University, to AM&N. And his first year, he went down there on his football scholarship. But he wanted to transfer to the University of Arkansas. And my father, I give him a lot of credit because he accommodated my brother. Instead of saying, look, you got a scholarship down there, you got a football scholarship, you need to stay down there where you got a free education. But no, he wanted to go to the University of Arkansas. My father let him go to the University of Arkansas and paid his tuition, which was substantially more than what he was paying down there at A&M.
With the scholarship, absolutely.
Right.
Well, you give a lot of this credit to your father, and it sounds like he drove a steady plow. You had your mother and a well-structured home. Many young people today don't have this opportunity, but I know it runs rich in you to pass it along or pay it forward. Let's dive back a little bit into the 60s and 70s here in Little Rock, Arkansas. For our viewers out there, I'm very proud of Little Rock, Arkansas and the legacy that has been built. Many people do history makers or torchbearers. I consider Justice Mays a living legacy, whom I'm giving his flowers to today, yesterday, and 2 weeks from now, because we must pay homage to individuals like this. Justice Mays, take us through the 60s and 70s, if you don't mind, and neighborhoods like University Park and Granny Mountain. You talked about your dad owning a grocery store and then going on to own a beverage or liquor store, and then got into real estate. But College Station and University Park and Granny Mountain emerged despite redlining and blockbustering. And I was really reading and learning recently about blockbustering. So talk to us. You know, we might equate blockbuster to some rap lyrics today, but talk to our audience about what blockbustering and redlining was doing, and how did you and your peers overcome those obstacles, and in particular your dad and his movement towards real estate in times when that existed.
Well, we got into developing multifamily housing through HUD.
Okay.
And HUD was a little bit more objective about its location. So
HUD, for those out there that doesn't know, Housing and Urban Development. For my young people watching, those folks in the streets that may be watching, never heard some of these acronyms. HUD, HUD. Go ahead, Justice Bates.
I got into the business of working with him on these projects. Um, the first time that the village square
Yeah.
was a multifamily development, one of the few with air conditioning and housing, and that was a fairly unique opportunity at that time. You could rent an apartment, but to get one with air conditioning was unusual for our people. And Village Square was a prominent development in allowing us a middle class existence. And my mother-in-law was the manager of Village Square. She was a tough manager. In fact, after I graduated from law school, and I went to Washington, then I came back after a year there. I told my wife that I was not going to sign the lease. She had to sign the lease for her mama because I knew her mama did not play. Her mama was a very tough.
You need good family business women, men like that. That's good. You need that.
So I was kind of familiar with that development, and when I was in, I remember in my science class at Howard, my freshman year, a development out in Granite Mountain, which was a middle class development where they built some new homes, and it was across the street from Booker Homes, which was a multifamily project.
Okay.
But they mentioned this middle class development in a science book in my social science class I was reading about. They referenced the project across from Booker Homes. I can't think of the name of that housing development, but those were middle class housing that was developed basically for black people.
And this is
white
during your time in Howard. You read about this.
Yes.
Okay.
I read. They made a reference to it in my social science book. So that let you know how unique it was, even at that time. So the attitudes began to change. The opportunity changed. When I first graduated, I went to law school at the University of Arkansas. My first year up there, I was the only black in the law school. And when I graduated, I went to work with the Justice Department under the honor graduate program. And I stayed up there for a year and got a lot of experience, practiced law, and had an opportunity to come back to Little Rock because the prosecutor at that time was a gentleman by the name of Dick Atkinson. When he ran for the prosecuting attorney, my father got me involved in the campaign against him, and that campaign was by a guy by the name of Miles Hill. Miles Hill lost, but his brother David went into the office of Dick Atkinson and supported him in the runoff. And so they called me when I was up at Justice and asked me if I wanted to come back to Little Rock and work as a deputy prosecutor. And at the same time, I had been doing some trial work up in Washington, working with the U.S. attorney from Baltimore, Maryland, who had moved a case to Arlington because the case involved his father-in-law of the mayor. And the mayor had been extorted. They had tried to extort some money from the mayor. So he had also offered me a job to come out of the Justice Department to go to the U.S. Attorney's office in Baltimore. but I selected to return to Little Rock because at that time you could practice privately and have a full-time job as a prosecuting attorney. So that gave us an opportunity to enter into private practice. And
Make a living while serving the public.
Right.
Got it.
And I came back here and did that. And so when I was as a deputy prosecutor, of course, they didn't have any black judges at that time, but I never will forget one of the challenging situations there was I was before a judge named Kirby. Kirby was a longtime judge, and I was the prosecutor. I was taking a plea on a young man, and the lawyer for him was a white lawyer. The defendant was black. And so the lawyer was talking to the judge, and when he was talking to the judge said, "What do we want to do with this young man?" I can't think of the lawyer's name. He said, "Oh," and he held up behind the young man's hand 2 fingers and said, "This is a good nigga, Judge. This is a good nigga. Let's be lenient with him." I objected. I said, "I object, Your Honor." And he said, "What you object to, lawyer?" I said, "He's using a disparaging term towards his client." What did he do? What did he say? I said, "He said nigger." And the judge said, whatever his name was, "John, can't you say nigger?" And he said, "Yeah, I can say nigger, Your Honor." He said, "Well, let's say negro." And the judge turned to me and said, "Is that all right there, lawyer?" And I said, "Well, that's better than nigger." He said, "Okay," and moved on. And those were the kind of challenges that the new environment presented as we moved into jobs that were not traditionally held by us. So I worked there for about 3 years, and then I joined John Walker and Phil Kaplan. And John Walker was really a very dynamic and a very aggressive lawyer. I really appreciated the opportunity to work, and so was Kaplan. Kaplan was very capable. We were the first integrated law firm in Little Rock.
A Jew and 2 blacks.
Yes. Well, Kaplan was Jewish.
Jewish, correct.
Right.
Then you and Mr. Walker.
Me and Mr. Walker. And Mr. Walker was very tenacious.
Sure.
And he would sue for if you dropped a match on the floor.
He going for it.
He was going to make sure that he stood up for our people.
And never changed. This time I'm honored to have served in the legislature with him, and he never changed until his last breath. And this is a man, ladies and gentlemen out there in podcast land. You can do your research, Google Attorney John Walker, from Elaine to Silas Hunt, the University of Arkansas, to Nolan Richardson, to countless cases for justice and really just for what was right during those times, and the triumphant of a man who is duly missed, but his legacy lives on while you and John or Attorney Walker serving, and that was quite special, I bet.
And Phil Kaplan,
and
right.
Mr. Kaplan.
And John was so notorious that frequently when blacks were terminated from their employment, they would say, "I'm going to go get Mr. Walker about this." And they would frequently get a second chance.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. With all of that, I wanted to ask you, what's your guiding philosophy behind all of those developments? You go from being a law student, practicing attorney, all-star cast of attorneys in your law firm, to real estate development. What's your philosophy, Justice Mays, at this stage in your life behind all of those developments, your ownership, all the things you've seen as we look at the transformation of communities, especially Black communities, and especially in Central Arkansas? What has been your guiding philosophy over all these years?
Well, I was aggressive. I got into the business world. When I went to the prosecuting attorney's office, one of the secretary's husbands managed a Minuteman restaurant, which was a local franchise in the state, hamburger franchise. And he was trying to buy it. So she mentioned it to me, and I came up with the money, and we bought a Minuteman franchise restaurant over in North Little Rock. And we operated it together. So that was my kind of first venture into business.
Mm-hmm.
And then I bought some property over on Roosevelt and built another Minuteman restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And we developed that. So I had 2 Minuteman restaurants while I was practicing law. And I left the prosecuting attorney's office, and they changed the districting, and this was the first time that we had a majority black district. And
explain to them what a majority black district means. I'm politically astute, but
well,
help our listeners understand what that actually means.
When you're in the legislature, you run from a location or area with a certain population, and this population was majority black. I think we had 59, this population was 59% black. District 3, we called it District 3 at that time, was 59% black and 41% white, which was the first time that Arkansas had a mixed district with a black majority population.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And 3 of us, it was a 3-member district though, and 3 of us ran from that district. And actually 2 blacks and 1 white was elected from that district. The other person elected from that district was Dr. Townsend,
mm-hmm.
who was much older than I was. I was still in my late 20s when I decided to run. And we had a majority black Senate district too, which meant that the population of that Senate district was majority black. And Senator Jewell, Dr. Jewell, I should say, ran for that district. So we had 2 blacks from Little Rock to go into the Arkansas legislature. Arkansas House was 100 members, and blacks had not served in the Arkansas House of Representatives since, I think, 1893. So in the 20th century, we had not had any blacks serve in the Arkansas legislature.
And what year was this when you were?
This was 72.
So 1823 to 1972.
Right.
I'll do the math. Keep going.
And the only other district which had a black black majority was from Pine Bluff.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the legislature, we went into the legislature in 1973. We had 3 black House members, 2 from Little Rock and 1 from Pine Bluff, and 1 black Senate member, 1 from Little Rock, Senator Jewell. That was the first time since the 1800s that blacks served in the legislature. I was pretty aggressive. I was talking to you earlier about a bill. You had what you call morning hour, and that was for potentially non-controversial bills. I had a bill that I was going to present, and you could talk to the speaker and get a schedule to go up and present your bill and explain some matter. And so I had talked to the speaker. I had this bill I wanted to present, and a guy named Paul Van Dawson, who was a white gentleman from the Conway area. When I went up, the speaker said, "Okay, man, I'm gonna recognize you." So when I went up to speak, Van Dawson raised his hand, because you could pull down, make the guy lose his position to speak if he could get 5 hands to say it was controversial. So when I went up to the podium to speak, Paul Van Dawson raised his hand, "Man, Mr. Speaker, I object." And so the speaker said, Paul, don't worry, Mays has talked to me already. This is a non-controversial bill. And Van Dalton said, Mays cannot have a non-controversial bill. So give me 5 hands. They had 5 hands and they raised it and I had to come off.
Wow.
And I went and talked to the speaker again and talked to Van Dawson. And the next day I raised the issue. I worked out a deal. I said, why don't you go to the bathroom when I go up there to speak,
sure.
right? So that you don't look like you changing your position.
Sure.
And I can go on and make my presentation because this is not got anything to do with race.
Sure.
And he said, okay. And so I was able to communicate with old Van Dawson.
Now, can't you imagine in the middle of a government shutdown that this gentleman here has figured out a way to bring forth a non-controversial bill, which was never controversial by merit. It was controversial only by the body saying that he was black.
Right.
And he was not afforded the privilege and opportunity to present his legislation. However, aside from his race and aside from a temperament of reaction, he responded by simply going to that other legislative member and saying, why don't you go to the restroom?
Right.
So that you don't appear to have visually conceded to me presenting my bill. And from that, you got a chance to, well, I guess that likens to this philosophy. What would you call that? You know, the way you've been able to move and maneuver to make things happen.
Well,
what is that to you, Paul?
I think that's communication. You always have to have, in any legislative process, or any process where you're trying to get something done, you got to be able to communicate. And you got to figure out a way to allow the other person to at least let you talk. I mean, and I always try to look for a way to open up the floor so we could work together. And I knew the first thing I had to tell them, this is not about civil rights. I mean,
you have to clear the air first.
Yeah, this is about everybody's rights, okay? This is not about us at all.
Oh.
And of course, you got to have a copy of what you got. And I gave them a copy of the bill. And they said, you don't see anything in there about race, do you? No, sure. I don't. I said, okay, this helps your mama and everybody else's mama who gets on a bus. And this was what I call the uninsured motorist coverage, man. And then we still have that law. That law is still in
good consumer protection bill.
For the public.
Sure.
So it was a bill that required common carriers to carry uninsured motorist coverage for their customers. So if you were on a bus and you were the bus was hit by a person without insurance, and the bus company would have insurance coverage to protect you for everyone on the bus. So it passed, and the governor signed it, and it became law. And now when I introduced my civil rights bill, that couldn't get any votes.
It didn't get any light.
No,
Come on.
No light,
it harkens to a day like today, and I keep the political itch and the desire to serve, whether elected or not. But being from the South, and particularly being black in the South, the assumption is immediately you're black, you have to be a Democrat, or your white Republican colleagues and friends can't be seen talking to you. But I've put a mute to all of those opportunities and tried to do as you have laid forth to bear. The process of regular and consistent communication and transparent communication can go so much further in this process in which we are seeing people fight over now than one would have you believe. And there will be a day that it comes back to that. But right now, we'll let them sort it out. Let me jump into this next question. What lessons about leadership, integrity, and power did those years in public service teach you?
Well, I think some of the lawsuits, and one of the lawsuits that I was defending a lot of black students from Arkadelphia who got into a fight with some white students when they were trying to integrate. During the integration, there was always some tension that we had to get over. And so we went down. I went down. They charged all in a fight. The sheriff charged all the black kids with assault and battery. So the next witness who came up, who happened to be white, I asked that witness to state for the record what his race was. He did, and the judge held me in contempt. You're in contempt of court. So I said, "What's my fine?" And he said, $100. And I said, "Okay, I'll go take care of that, and I'll be right back." So I went down to the sheriff's office, and a gentleman who came down, went to court with me, a guy named Robert Fleming, who was really one of the first blacks to serve as a state police person, black, to serve as a state policeman in Arkansas. But he was serving as a investigator for our firm at that time.
Solid.
And so we went down, and I went to pull out that check to write him a check, and the sheriff said, "Oh no," he said, "No, we don't accept checks, son. Is that all you got?" And Fleming, who was with me, he said, "Look, I got some cash." And I said, "No, we got $100 in cash." And I think I had 50, and he gave me 50. And we gave the sheriff $100, and I went back up. And when I went back up, as we were coming in, there were a lot of black parents in the courthouse, in the courtroom. And when I came in, they had collected a bunch of money, put it in a sack, and gave me the money. As I came in, they signaled for me. And I went over there, and when I came in, they gave me this sack full of money. I just put that money on the table. And I went on with my questioning.
Oh, wow.
And the next time I raised the issue, he didn't hold me in contempt. The judge...
We got enough for some more contempt over here, Judge. Wow, talk about resilience.
But he ultimately barred our law firm from coming down to practice in that court. And we appealed it to the Arkansas Supreme Court, and they reversed him on that. And we got a white lawyer from Fort Smith, I think, to represent us. But those were the kind of challenges that we had. In fact, one of my more controversial suits was against the Little Rock Police Department. I sued the police department because at that time, the jails, they had separate jails. Blacks were in separate facilities. They kept the blacks in one facility and the whites in another facility. So you had, I thought, a pattern and practice of brutality too against these blacks. And we filed suit in federal court, and I brought in these witnesses who testified against abuse. And the biggest issue that was in my favor was when they had physical evidence of physical abuse, if they didn't charge these blacks with resisting arrest or some charge that justified the use of force, then they plainly were in violation of the law. And they didn't at that time have a pattern and practice of charging with the blacks with resisting arrest. So that made my case. When I was presenting the evidence, I said, "Well, Your Honor, there's no justification for this black guy or this abuse here. And it's obvious that he had physical abuse, and the officer didn't charge him with resisting arrest or anything, so there's no justification for that." And I guess I presented about 26 or 30 witnesses. I had a gentleman helping me. By the way, the Little Rock Police Department penetrated my office and was paying him, one of the guys that I had working for me, who would go and get my witnesses. They were paying him to disclose to them information about who I was going to get. I had an expert from Chicago that I had, and he was telling them that, you know, he had had some drinks before he went to court, and they were doing everything they could to undermine my case. But ultimately, Judge Isley ruled for us, but it took him 10 years to rule in my favor.
10 years.
10 years. And the practices had substantially changed in the 10-year period. But that gives you some appreciation for the climate. And this was a federal judge and had a reputation of being a fairly liberal federal judge. But the tolerance of the disrespect and the mistreatment was present in Arkansas in so many different ways. And we, as a law firm, were very aggressive in attacking it. And so Kaplan and Walker and myself were very vigorous in trying to change the practices. And he was a legal defense fund attorney. So we got financing for some of our lawsuits from the legal defense fund, which was a part of the NAACP.
Sure.
So those were periods where you had to be aggressive, and you had to kind of stand up. Otherwise, they were going to run over you.
And,
And,
you know, I hear words like high tolerance, persistence, aggressive, communicative, willing to take the lumps and continue to come back and fight over 10 years. You mentioned a story offline about your cousin coming over from California and refusing to get off that bus. And, you know, just all of those collections of stories sounds like you've got a kaleidoscope of a philosophy. I've got 2 questions, and we're going to be closing this episode out and joining Justice Mays again on our trail. You know, Judge, you've worked with politicians and presidents, and not only presidents of the Western civilization here in the United States, but international presidents of continents like Africa and other places around the global world, and carried a spirit of service along the way, along with those other words that we explained earlier. What did those experiences teach you about the reach and responsibility of Arkansas leadership on the world stage? All of those things you did, what did all of that teach you when you were out here on the global stage representing Arkansas?
well, I got a chance to get on the global stage because of President Clinton, Governor Clinton, then President Clinton. If you can look at the environment now and see how challenging it would be for a governor of a small state like Arkansas to obtain the presidency. So I think I consider myself extremely fortunate to have been serving politically in a time when that level of talent was available in Arkansas. So I campaigned for President Clinton and raised money all over the country and raised money full time. And I was, I chaired his inaugural.
I'm familiar. Though I'm too young to go. It looked like it was a great time. I mean, I was just looked up there.
But I went to Washington and spent about 8 years there. But I also went and worked with a lobbying firm. I didn't work for the government. I worked for a company called Cassidy and Associates, which was the biggest lobbying firm in Washington at that time. And working with that lobbying firm, I met a young lady who was working there, and she had a young student from Ghana living with her. And she shared with me that President Rollins, who was the president of Ghana at that time, she understood, wanted to meet our president, President Clinton. And so we negotiated an opportunity to go and meet President Rollins. He invited us through this young man who whose father worked for President Rawlings, he extended the invitation to us to come to Ghana. And we went to Ghana. I met him. I met Rawlings. In fact, he was a pilot too. And we went up in a plane together. He was in the plane. And while I was in the plane with him, he said, "I want you to land the plane, Mays." I said, "Oh, Mr. President, I don't think that's the wisest thing to do." He said, "Land this plane." So I said,
The president
"Yes, sir."
of Ghana.
So we
Instructed you to land the
started to go down and land in the plane. And then when I got almost to the bottom, he grabbed the controls and took us right back up. "Let's do this again." And so I went back up. And then we went, I did, and landed the plane. And Rollins was sharing with me his admiration for President Clinton. He said, I was observing that race for president, and he said, I was a little surprised that the young gentleman from your state prevailed, but he was obviously the most talented person in that race. And I predicted he would prevail. And after I left and went back from Ghana, came back to the States, I shared my interaction with Rollins with President Clinton. I said, "Look, I went over to Africa. First time I've ever been to Africa.
Wow.
Met the president of Ghana. He saw you. He picked you as the winner." And Clinton said, "You want me to invite him over?" I said, "Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir." And so he said, "I'll do that." And he did. He had his chief of staff, Mac McClarty, advised me of the date that they were going to invite him. And I flew to Ghana, Accra, Ghana.
Shout out Mac McClarty, Razorback Transit, McClarty Family Motors. Good people out there. Keep going.
And we went over there, and I told him, I said, "Mr. President, the president's going to invite you over on whatever date, like October the 30th or something." And he said, "How does he know I'm going to be available on that date?" I said, "Don't worry about it. Look, you need another date, we'll get you another date." He said, "No, I'll be available. Don't worry about it. I'll work with that."
I'm going to work with it.
Yeah.
I love
and he came over, and Clinton did invite him. And I greeted him there and formed a good relationship with him. And I was involved in a project of expanding a power facility in a place called Takoradi, Ghana. And I got a company out of Michigan, a company called CMS Energy, that I met through the lady and through my work at Cassidy and Associates to contract with the country of Ghana to expand the power facility from a 330 megawatt facility to a 660 megawatt facility. So they doubled the size of that facility. And that increased their power. That was one of the biggest issues in Africa is the issue of power. And so they eventually sold that plant to Dubai.
Right.
And so you learn a lot because of that exposure. And as I would travel to Ghana, I would usually stop in one of the other countries. You can go to Ghana through France or England, Italy.
School them, because I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to get there, but
and so I would go to one of the countries, and I would spend more time coming back than going. So I would, if I stopped in Rome or London or any place, to spend about 3 or 4 days to kind of get a better feel for this world. And that, I look at that opportunity as an opportunity that I got because I was aggressive in politics, and because I was fortunate enough to know a president. And I was thinking one of the, this is a picture of running
wow.
with the president. During that period of time, I'd get up and run. Wherever I traveled, I would always run in the morning, try to run a mile or two.
Just a subtle flex for our viewers out there. He just happened to show me a picture of him and President Clinton jogging on Pennsylvania Avenue. Just light flex, nothing that, everyday average folks would do. But when you have great relationships and you've got a great upbringing, such as the one your father and mother instilled in you, to be polite and to know and to admit when you're wrong and to do your due diligence in your homework and to remain persistent and to follow your dreams or your aspirations, be it your brother going to UAPB or I'm going to the University of Arkansas, took you through all of those opportunities to where you're showing me as we wrap up just some small photographs of you running down the block with President Clinton on a rainy day on Pennsylvania Avenue in the nation's capital. What a delight, Justice Mays. 80 plus years old, a living legacy right here in front of me today. And, today is a special day as we wrap up. I laid to rest a dear friend and a torchbearer in North Little Rock. Shout out, Brother Paul Holderfield. May your family have some very bright days on a wonderful celebration today for a true servant leader. I'll ask you this question in earnest. When people speak your name, and this is a me and you conversation here, 50 years from now, and I'm traveling through Spain and these airports, and I'm having vivid thoughts of you telling me to spend a couple of extra days. What do you hope I'll remember? And what message would you leave me today as I'm building the next chapter in Arkansas with, regardless, it's 82 members in the House of Representatives. I was once House Minority Leader. We've got 135 members. It's a supermajority. In these times, what message would you leave me and other young people who are building the next chapter of Arkansas?
Well, I would say you did what you should have done by serving in the House. You got to stop. You got to run for those positions. They don't appoint you to be a House member. You have to get into a political situation where you reach out for votes, introduce yourself to people. And then when you get there, you got to learn how to work with these people to get your goals established. So I think being active in the community, being aggressive about getting out there, playing a role, trying to shape that community to reflect some of your history, some of your values, is the least you can do to improve the quality of life for not only your children, but for other children. And I think that's what I would look back on. I would say, do that, get involved, be active. Don't let the community shape you. You help shape the community.
And who knows? One trip to Africa, a conversation with the president could lead to a president of one country going to see another president of another country. And it's all because of those things to get active and get involved. Last question for my viewers, and it's always to close out. Do you feel that Justice Mays, you are stronger and the state of Arkansas are stronger today than they were yesterday? And if so, why?
Oh, I think we have so much more opportunity in Arkansas today than we had many years ago. Actually, it's almost like a different country, a different state. I mean, the involvement and the employment opportunity that we have, the level of participation. We have a black mayor in Little Rock. We've had leadership, political leadership. We have people running for governor, running for Congress. So we have a much more open environment for us to compete in Arkansas. And what we have to do is compete. We have to throw our hat in the ring. And the fact that we lose, the issue is to participate. We can't win them all, but we will win some if we participate. So my lesson is be aggressive in participation. Go out and make a difference. Don't sit at home just watching television. Get out here and compete for these positions. That's why we have a black mayor. And I think, and it shows you that the mindset of the majority population has changed somewhat too. I mean, the environment, the opportunities that it creates for our kids and their kids can only be taken advantage of if we get out and become aggressive in seeking those opportunities.
You heard it here first, participation. You can't sit at home on your couch. I'm not gonna go into that commercial. Look, I know you're at home. I know you're watching this. Get off the couch and participate. Judge, there's so much more I could unpack, and maybe we'll have another conversation. As I mentioned, want to get the construct of Little Rock, but for our viewers out there today, I hope that this information and knowledge that is shared to you by one of Arkansas's living legacy, a hero and friend of mine, attorney, former Supreme Court Justice, former legislator, businessman, business owner, Richard Mays Sr. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you
It's
for
been
the
an honor.
opportunity.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you.
I hope that you all, as usual, were left stronger after hearing this information from one of our own living legacies here in the great state of Arkansas than you were before you tuned in. Until next time, thank you for joining us for Stronger with Armstrong podcast series. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to follow us on all social media platforms, streaming platforms, and be sure to subscribe.